Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm Crystal Cook, the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at the Association for International Professional Accountants. Before I get in, I'm going to ask you to all bear with us. We're all at home during the pandemic and we have kids, dogs, all kinds of things going on around us. So if you hear any of that, just ignore it and keep things moving. This is our new normal, so we're just going to have to roll with the punches. So just kind of to kick it off for you, I just want to say the diversity, equity, and inclusion is an important focus area for the association, as we believe a workforce that is reflective and inclusive of the global communities in which we serve is greatly positioned to innovatively solve the challenging and complex issues facing clients and the evolving public interest. Our member-facing D&I team focuses on four primary areas: ethnic minorities, women, LGBTQ, and young members or generational diversity. However, another important element of diversity that we try to incorporate is people with disabilities, which we feel intersects with all of the D&I work that we do. It's important that we recognize the value that we can bring to our profession by being more inclusive and providing a safe place for people of all backgrounds, including those with disabilities, to feel welcome and valued. So with that said, April is Autism Awareness Month, which is a time when the world focuses on sharing stories and providing opportunities to increase understanding of and acceptance of people with autism. So this is a way to foster worldwide support and bring awareness. So the timing only seems fitting for our profession to also talk about this topic. So joining me today, I have Gabrielle Luma, who is the co-founder and CEO at Mod Ventures, LLC, a member firm based in Arizona. Also from her team is Michael Augerson, who is a team leader there at Mod Ventures. And last but certainly not least, Daniel Openden. He is the president and CEO of the Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center, also coincidentally based out of Arizona. So welcome, all of you. Thank you for joining me today. And we're just going to dive right into our discussion. So Daniel, can you start by telling us a little bit about your organization? Kind of start off by explaining what autism is for those who maybe do not know, and then provide your thoughts on how autism intersects with DEI and all our related initiatives in that space.
Sure, Crystal, and thank you for having me. Grateful to be here. So to start off with, autism is a developmental disability, and it's typically characterized by challenges or deficits in language and communication, social skills, and what we call repetitive or restricted behavior. So that could be anything from kids who maybe rock back and forth, or they have little visual stims in front of their eyes, or others that have really sort of obsessive or perseverative routines or behaviors. They like to line things up. They have a certain interest that they're afterwards. And the big thing to understand about autism is that it is absolutely a spectrum. So you have very, very, very mild symptoms on one end to very, very severe symptoms on the other. And one of our famous sayings in the field that we love to remind people of is that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And that is to say that the heterogeneity in this population is huge. And part of the challenge that we actually really enjoy is figuring out how to meet the needs of a population that is so different from one another and help integrate them into the community. And I, as Crystal said, I'm the president and CEO at SARC. SARC is Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center, and we're in Phoenix, Arizona. And our vision, we have a very big vision or purpose that gets us up every day in the morning to get to work and to get to the things we care about. And we articulated that by asking ourselves one very, very important question. And that is, what would the world look like if SARC were to achieve all of its goals? The answer to that question became our vision. And that is people with autism meaningfully integrated into inclusive communities. And all of that vision statement is important, right? People with autism, meaning we're not just working with little kids, we're working across the entire lifespan, from children to teens to adults. Meaningfully integrated, meaning that we are not just taking a child with autism and sticking them in a regular education third grade classroom and calling them integrated into that classroom. Same thing, we're not just taking an adult with autism and having somebody charitably hire them and then saying they're integrated into that workforce. Meaningfully integrated, meaning they're a part of that classroom, or they're a part of that job, a part of that business, a part of that culture. That meaningful integration is just as important. It can't just be integrated on itself. And then into inclusive communities, meaning essentially that we are working to improve the community to better support and include people with autism. And in fact, at SARC, we kind of work on this yin and yang, right? So we're absolutely think it's critical to help teach and improve the behaviors and skills of people with autism. But if we just do that and we don't also change or improve the skills and behaviors of the community, then we won't get to that vision of people meaningfully integrated into inclusive communities. And so as it relates to DEI, it's really that inclusion piece that's so important, that we want to fully integrate and include people with autism in the community, and we want our community to fully integrate and include people with autism.
That's great. Very, very well said. I appreciate that. And I think we can all relate to inclusiveness, right? And it's whatever element of diversity you're looking at, we're all trying to have a more inclusive society and a more inclusive accounting profession. So let's turn to what that actually looks like in practice for us here in the accounting profession. So Gabrielle has given me permission to call her Gabby, so I'm going to do that from now on out. So Gabby, your firm has done an amazing job of being inclusive in this space. So can you tell us a little about your firm and share some of what this inclusive journey looks like for you?
Thank you, Crystal. Yes, really excited to be here. Thank you so much for allowing us to share our journey. So I would say probably in 2011, 2012, we started working with a work school program called Chapel Haven, and that's here in Tucson. And we first started because we had a need. We were thinking about how we could have all these documents that come in during tax season be scanned in and, to help the tax department. And so we started with tasks like that, and we worked with several people who came in, and sometimes they had a helper who would come in and help them understand what it is that they were looking, what we were looking for, and help them through those steps. And we had some staff that did really well, trainees, interns is what we called them, and some did not do so well. And so it was really just a trial, and everybody got to try out their new skills. And then Michael was introduced to us, and that's pretty much the end of the beginning, because Michael came in, he was already being trained, already going to college. I think it was before his first semester into the Eller School of Business at U of A. And so he already had some basic accounting behind him and just took to the environment so well. And so I think we're here like 9 years later, and Michael is a huge part of our firm, does so much, well, not just work, but I mean, he just supports his team and his clients. And everyone, we get so much feedback. Everyone loves him. Everyone loves to work with Michael. And he has a great sense of humor and just a great team member in general. And so really it was just, over the years, learning how Michael worked and making a few modifications, but not very many. Actually, Michael's just been amazing. At first, we were all on site, and then we moved to virtual, which could have been another, interesting step. Mm-hmm. And Michael did amazing. So we're all virtual, and he's been able to progress in all of our transformational changes, which has really been amazing.
That's great. That's such a heartwarming story. I think it just sitting here, I'm like, oh, that's so great to hear how that all worked out for you. And it sounds like Michael has made even, I think you probably started this journey to maybe help boost Michael and help advance Michael, but it sounds like Michael's also had an impact on each of you at that organization and made you better. And I think that's what it's all about. And so Daniel, and you mentioned that your organization works to integrate people with autism into their existing communities. Have you found that it also, they end up having a greater impact on their community than the community does on them?
Yeah, absolutely. And Crystal, I mean, if you get to call Gabby, you can call me Danny.
Yes.
Perfect. I don't know who Daniel is, to be honest with you.
Okay,
but yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, one of the things that we try to help people understand is that this is not a charitable hire. We want people with autism to compete for these jobs. We want them to be paid competitively, just like any other employee. So this is not something that you're doing as a favor. I think where it starts for us is building a relationship with that employment partner. And Gabby, I'm thrilled to hear that you're working with Chapel Haven. It's a great organization. That's an employment partner for you that's willing to work with you to figure out as a starting point, is this going to be a good fit for somebody that we have with autism? We like to then understand what the job interview is going to look like. So there are people with autism that really struggle in job interviews, but could be outstanding employees. And if we can help understand what the employer is looking for, if we can also help prepare somebody with autism to be successful in that job interview, that can really open doors. But that's part of having a partnership where you work together. And then another big piece of it is, what are the various accommodations or modifications we need to be able to help that person with autism be successful? So just like my example earlier, you can't just take somebody with autism, put them in a general education 3rd grade classroom, and then walk away and think everything's going to be great. It's how we work together for that classroom. And in this case, how we work together for that employer, that job, that business, to be able to integrate people with autism in the workplace. And then to answer your question, Crystal, I mean, absolutely. What we generally hear is that maybe people are a little bit nervous about getting started. How's this going to work? How is the person going to succeed in here? What happens if it doesn't work? But over time, what we see is that not just business owners end up really valuing this, but more importantly, the other employees that work within the company report back to business owners, back to their managers. They're proud to work for an organization that is inclusive of people with autism and other disabilities. They're proud to work in an organization that integrates people into their workplace, that brings that to the culture. They're proud of the culture that they've created where people with autism can be successful at their work. So we see that people have more enjoyment of their work and proud of the organization they work for when we integrate people with disabilities into the workplace. But the other piece of this is really true as well. So early in my career, I used to teach a lot about the types of treatment that we do for people with autism to schools and to teachers. And after we get done doing all this, we then say to them, these tactics, these interventions, these strategies that we're teaching you, don't convince yourself that they are just good for people with autism. The fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, it's just good teaching. That's what special education does. We take the kids that are the hardest to teach and we figure out better ways to teach them. But at the end of the day, that's just better teaching. And the same goes in the workplace. Some of the accommodations and modifications that we put together for people with autism to be successful in a workplace, at the end of the day, is just good practice for all employees. So think about that person with autism who just needs clarity. They need a checklist of the very specific things that they need to do and in what order, as an example, for them to be successful in the workplace. But how many of us do so much better when we have a checklist in front of us? Things don't get missed. We tend to be more efficient. We get everything done on that checklist. We feel a sense of satisfaction as we move from one piece to another. So it turns out that the accommodations and modifications that we make for people with autism may actually make everyone in that workplace that much more productive and effective. And so thereby, people with autism are contributing. They're contributing to the social elements of that culture, but they're also contributing to the productivity of that business and that culture as well.
That's great points. And a lot of that resonated with me, especially the part about the checklist, right? Us accountants love checklists. I make one like every day of all the things that I go through. And I think in general, I would just love to have some of the work that I get I would love someone to just take the time, explain it to me, like slow things down. And I think we could all, to your point, a lot of those um, skill sets we could all benefit from. It's not just for people with autism. So I think thank you for sharing that piece too. And so now I think we should talk to Michael. I think we're talking about him like he's not here in the room with us. And so I think we should turn to him and hear some of his perspective. So Michael, I'm going to ask you a two-part question. So first, what did Gabby and the team at Mod Ventures do that attracted you to the firm and keeps you coming back every day? And then two, were there any challenges that you all had to work together to overcome in your day-to-day there? So turn it over to you, Michael.
Right. Well, in terms of what brought me into the program was initially the West program, as we mentioned, which unfortunately is closing out due to the whole pandemic. But beyond that, I really liked the bit of the environment that I was being brought into. That I was going through, university and expecting that it'd be like one of those big offices with cubicles and fluorescent lights. But after I found it was a bit more, comfortable and more calm in an atmosphere. And once it went over to the virtual environment, even before the pandemic, it helped things out a lot more because I got to control the environment around me in the physical sense. Like I wouldn't have fluorescent lights, a lot of people talking in the background, and allowed me to focus a lot more on the work at hand rather than all the distractions that were happening around me, which allowed me to become a more productive worker. And as far as the challenges that I had to overcome, there were probably two real major issues that came up, both relating to communication. First was with communication with coworkers, because one of the main things that I do in my duties is writing down the client procedures, saying what to do regarding bookkeeping or sales tax, payroll. And the issues there was that I was trying to translate my sort of a train of thought to a format that could be understood by the rest of the office. And trying to it was also like translating one version of English into another form of English, if you can sort of get that, like a regional dialect transfer of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
So that to some extent was a challenge, but thankfully it seems to work out well because from what I've heard of my colleagues, the procedures I write out tend to normally be very clear and understood. And the other issue regarding communication is with the clients, because pretty much none of them actually know that I'm on Spectrum. It's not something that I bring up whenever we're discussing assets or payroll or any of that stuff. So they have these expectations of me being neurotypical, or rather, not autistic. So because of that, I sort of have to try to put on this almost persona a little bit, like almost a performance whenever I'm speaking to clients, especially when it's the person and not just email. And with email, you can sort of have someone review your written work, just almost like a proofreading, just to make sure that they're getting the idea across. But when it's on the phone, or even more if it's a video call or in person, there's a bit more issues with it. Like you have to make sure you regulate your tone of voice and project some sense of confidence that you actually know what you're talking about. And as far as face to face, you have to make sure that your face is having the right facial expressions, that you have the right posture, the right body language. And because of that, it's usually a little bit hard to do, trying to fake being neurotypical to clients. So it's overall, just a little bit of a thing that you have to often practice, like especially when it's person to person and not video call. I normally, for those kinds of things, I have to practice facial expressions in the mirror and try to memorize those facial expressions and like how they physically feel in the muscles. So that way I know what to project of those facial expressions when I'm speaking to a client directly.
Yep. That's so in summary, it sounds like you said for the first part, the people at Mod made the environment comfortable for you. They welcomed you in and they made you feel like a member of the team. And so that environment made you feel safe. We call that psychological safety, to be able to thrive and excel in the way you needed to. And they supported you on, and I think I heard you mention that there was patience involved. There were some, in those challenging situations that you were exposed to, those around you were patient and they helped you navigate through those. And it sounds like you did work on your behalf to kind of work on things that you felt like were weaker to you or where you had struggles. And so everybody you put in, you said you kept practicing over and over again. So everyone seemed like they were committed to making this work on both ends. And I think that's very important. And so thank you for that and sharing that input. So follow up, is there any advice that you would give? So we have lots of employers who are probably going to be watching this and who want to try and integrate someone into their workforces too. And I purposely say integrate based on what Danny said to us earlier. Is there something that you would recommend or any advice that you would give them for integrating someone? Any tips on what worked well for you?
Right. Well, going back to what Danny said about interviews, one of the biggest issues I feel regarding those situations is namely that there's almost like it's like a different school of thought of social skills when with interviews. Like over here, you've got social skills for just making friends and chit chat, whereas over here you've got business and sort of selling yourself, and that to me is usually a big issue amongst the autism community, in which sometimes we have difficulty, like trying to sell our strengths, like trying to market ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to really get that in sort of a verbal form, and on top of the underlying, sometimes social and communication issues, that can be a problem. But what I think really works in terms of trying to sell yourself is through internships. Like being on the job there. I mean, even if it's unpaid, it shows the employer directly what the applicant can do on the field. I mean, all the verbal and selling and marketing skills a person can do in an interview, it would be nothing compared to seeing the actual results of the service and the work. I mean, that's for me what helped me get onto Gabby's team and allowed me to flourish in the office.
Yeah, that's great. Internships, I like that. A lot of firms do offer internships already, so it's broadening that to bring in people with disabilities so that they can start to figure out what that looks like and how to properly integrate. And I think that training is involved on both sides, right? Not just that's giving the people who are already there the skill set to understand how to integrate, like Gabby and her firm did. So, okay, I think we can move on to like the last piece of this this discussion today, which has been great. I feel like we could probably go for like a whole hour and a half on this, but so I'm going to go to each of you, Danny, Gabby, and Michael. If you have anything else that you want to add, but I want to say, is there one key message or point that you would leave everyone with if you had, one final tips? And I'm going to let Gabby go first, ladies first. So we'll start with you, Gabby. Is there anything that you want to share, any perspective, firm or what you felt like you went through?
Well, I think a lot of what Danny said was so true, in that a lot of the things that we needed to do anyways, and best practices for, operating a business was ideal for Michael, and it's also ideal for all staff. And so I think that over the course of the 20 some odd years that I've been working in public accounting, I can tell you that, we have so many different staff members and they all have different types of behaviors and ways they learn. They all have different types of gifts. And so Michael really is just, Michael. And we work with all of our staff and create an environment that's going to be helpful for them. And sometimes we modify how we communicate to our staff members. And, so I feel like Michael really, between Michael and I think it was fairly easy. Yes, we had to modify a few things, but it was really for the betterment of the firm. And after you get used to working with the individual quirks and such, then it's like no big deal. You just keep working. So it's been a blessing really for us to be a part of Michael's life and his and ours. And so it's been great. So I loved everything that Danny said about the modifications and things that you might have to do to help your company be successful. And of course, Michael has really helped us understand autism better.
Yeah. Seems like everybody's won in that situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Michael, do you want to share any final comments?
Well, yeah. Overall, I do feel like amongst the neurotypical and mainstream community that a lot of times autism is a bit misrepresented, whether it be from the big news stories of the sort of stressed out mother dealing with a problem child, or you've got the sort of over the top stereotype on film and television. These usually paint a negative sort of image of autism and what we are. On the whole, yes, there are some cases that are of the extreme severe, or the stressed out parents who don't know how to cope with their childhood. But on the whole, I feel that a lot of us, who do want jobs. Many of us have the skills and education for these kinds of jobs, and a lot of us want to live independent lives. I mean, we do sometimes have helpers, whether they be paid professionals or family and friends. But on the whole, many of us do want to have that sort of a sense of an independent life. And for me, I mean, whenever I can hear about people complain about rent payments or dealing with their taxes, I think that's, for me, whenever I do them, I think that's kind of I don't take that for granted, and because I know that to me that's a sign that I'm living a fully independent life, that I am just a regular adult like everyone else. And I mean, granted with a few issues of my own, but still.
We all have issues, Daniel. Or Michael.
So it's like, I feel like that overall, just on the whole, while we have some of our issues, we want the same things as everyone else. We just have a different way of thinking about it to gain to those end goals.
Yep, absolutely. Very well said. Danny?
I love what both Michael and Gabby were saying about this. I think for me, I'm so drawn to this field and people with autism because I really feel there is so much hope in autism, that we have the ability and the tools to help teach and improve behaviors and skills that can help them become more integrated into the community. But I can't emphasize enough how important an inclusive, supportive community is to people with autism. Places like SARC that provide direct services can only get people with autism so far. It's going to take an inclusive, supportive community to really make the biggest difference. And what I love about what Gabby is doing and how Michael is integrated into that workforce is really, and I don't mean to undersell this in any way, people like Gabby change the world. We are involved in a upcoming documentary that's going to be at the Sedona Film Festival. It's already won Best Documentary in 2 other film festivals, called In a Different Key. And it is all about the impact of community on people with autism. And I think 2 things are related to this. One, people like Gabby, as I said, are really changing the world by providing that inclusive and supportiveness. And I bet Gabby would tell you she doesn't even think so. But I wonder how many people in her office interact with Michael that has changed or improved their thinking about where they might integrate people with autism in all parts of their lives? I wonder how many people that Michael interacts with on a daily basis that's go, wow, the people with autism can really be employed in jobs, they can work, they can be successful, they can contribute to their organizations. And I wonder how many other employers are learning from this example and thinking, I too can hire somebody on the spectrum and make that a successful for both my business and for the person with autism. So I really do think there is a chain effect here of hiring people with autism that is good for the business, good for people with autism, and good for the broader community. But the other side of that is true as well, and that is that people with autism have something to contribute. And as you heard from Gabby, Michael is contributing in really meaningful ways, both socially and productively to her business. And so I think this ends up, Crystal, you kind of hit on this for a second. I think this is a win-win-win, right? It's a win for people with autism. It's a win for businesses, and it's a win for the community that you're impacting there. And we love being a part of stories like that. And it's a pleasure to be on this here with you today, helping to share some of that today.
Great, thank you. I think you've just stolen all my final closing talking points, so I will. I don't think I can top that, so I'm not even going to try. That's an excellent way to end. So I just want to thank each of you for joining me today. I think this was a very much needed discussion, and I think your contributions have helped guide us and will help us provide a better inclusive profession for the accounting profession. And so thank you again for joining us. Thank you for all those who tuned in to watch. And I do truly believe that we all are better if we work together. So
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.